All right, we are at a few minutes past the hour, so why don't we go ahead and get started? Like I said, this is probably going to be a small, intimate group. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Eugene Turk. I'm the VP of Business Development at Align, based in New Orleans. And I want to welcome you to this month's Coach slash Thought Leader webinar for June 2024. Hope everyone is doing well, and thank you so much for joining us today. This morning, or this afternoon, for me, we are thrilled to have Jan Thornborough with a presentation entitled Why Building Cyber Resilience into Your Strategy Matters. For those of you who may not be familiar with Jan, she is the founder and managing director of Outfox Limited. Jan spent 6 years with New Zealand's Government Communications Security Bureau as the manager of the Cyber Resilience Unit. And during that time, she designed and implemented a research study of more than 250 of New Zealand's nationally significant organizations to determine their capability to defend against cyber related threats and to understand their level of cyber resilience. She also initiated the development of a cyber resilience guide to address the deficits that were found in this study. Her work at the National Cybersecurity Center was instrumental in alerting the New Zealand government to a deficit of cybersecurity awareness in businesses nationwide that was obviously there and no one had really identified to that point. Her business, Outfox, is now laser focused on fixing that problem by helping SMEs, small and mid-sized enterprises, stay one step ahead of cybercrime. And she is certainly one of the thought leaders in New Zealand and much beyond on the issue of cyber resilience in small and mid-sized companies. So we are honored to have Jan present for us this month. As always, just one administrative matter. We want this to be as educational and informational for everyone as possible. Please feel free to pose your questions using the chat feature or use the Q&A feature within Zoom, and I will collect those and direct them to Jan at the conclusion of the presentation. So again, thank you everybody for attending this Align webinar, and I will now turn the microphone over to Jan.
Thank you, Eugene. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. As Eugene said, it's this morning here, a day ahead of you, so we're a bit of time travelers here. I'm talking to you today from a little place called Paraparaumu, which is on the Kapiti coast, which is near our capital, Wellington, in New Zealand. So I hope you'll get a lot out of this webinar today. First, I'd like to start with a little story. So I first got interested in cyber resilience quite a while ago. I was the IT manager of a large research institute. We had 5 sites, and I was sitting at my desk one day and the email stopped working, which was nothing unusual for an organisation like ours. The next thing I heard was that there was a lot of conversation going on out in the corridor. So I popped my head out of my office and everyone was saying the same thing. Oh, emails stopped working. We can't communicate with anybody. So I popped into the system administrator's office, which was right next door to mine, and he had a look of horror on his face. Apparently someone had clicked on an email and they had unleashed a virus that was going right through all our computer systems across all 5 sites. And he was frantically shutting down our systems so that it didn't get out to our customers and cause greater havoc. Now, this was a fairly benign attack. It was known as a worm. All it did was caused a nuisance of itself. It just replicated and it went out to emails to other companies. But the consequences of having this attack meant that all the scientists in the building came out in the corridor, stood around, talked, couldn't do their work because they were trying to write research papers, and they basically lost a lot of productivity. It took us roughly about 2 weeks to recover from the attack, and in that time we were losing millions every single day with lost productivity and an inability to do the work that we were being commissioned to do. Now that was 10 plus years ago. these days, the attacks are a lot more insidious and they're a lot more damaging, and it can take a lot longer than a couple of weeks to recover. So I could see back then that this was going to be a big problem for the future. So this is why I got into cyber resilience, and this is why I'm talking to you today. I'm not going to sell you anything, rather I want you to buy into a concept. It's a way of working that you need to consider for your organization as a whole. We know that cybersecurity focuses on tools and the software and the technical mitigations you put in place, but cyber resilience starts at the very top of the organization. It impacts on how we do our job. It focuses on how you train your people, you put processes in place, and how you get the technology right for your organization. There's always the three tenets of cyber resilience: people, processes, and technology. If one of them falls down, the rest of them come down with it. Our tagline is for our business is to stay one step ahead of cybercrime. And in today's digital economy, we're facing escalating cyber threats. And cyber resilience has become a critical component of modern business strategy, no matter the size of your organization. So I'll ask you a question. You can stick a message in chat, but do you all understand what cyber resilience is? So cyber resilience is an approach. It's well, I can tell you what it isn't. It's not something that you can set and forget. It's a way of thinking. It's a philosophy of working. Yes, but not as well as you. I like that. Thank you. Oops, sorry, jumping around in my slides. It's a philosophy of working. It's a philosophy of looking at the organization as a whole. And in terms of your strategy, you should be thinking about cybersecurity and how resilient your organization is when you're considering things in your strategic future. For example, you might be thinking about investing in technology in the future or expanding to another site. You should be thinking about what protections and things you should be putting in place as you are making those decisions to grow your business or to expand your business. Now, as I said before, cybersecurity focuses on the tools and the software, whereas cyber resilience looks at the whole company, looks at people, processes, and technology. Now, first thing I'd like to do is I'd like you to have a think about how resilient your organization is. I'll just get rid of the chat so you can see this. So this is a little graph we've created. So what we typically find when we work with our customers is that they tend to fall into one of these four quadrants. So down the bottom, this is organizations where you're not really thinking about cybersecurity. You think that it's going to happen to another organization and that you don't really need to be concerned about it. You might be of the mindset that actually you can't afford to think about it. And actually, it's never happened to you before, so you're just going to wait. And if you do get attacked, well, you're just going to have to be saved by someone. You know, in terms of your organisation, we call it the doors are open, and you've got a sign up saying, "Come in, help yourself to all our valuable information and assets." On the same level, we've got someone will bail me out. Now, what we typically find here is that companies that have an IT provider, when we ask them, what are you going to do if you're attacked? They just say, oh, I'm going to ring the IT people. They'll fix it for me. Well, yes, they will. They will fix your computers. They will hopefully get you back up and running if you're the only company that's been attacked within the list of customers that they're servicing. But they're not going to talk to your customers and restore your reputation and tell your customers why you've lost their sensitive information or why you can't deliver on a particular order. So yes, they can bail you out from a technical point of view, but they can't bail you out from a business point of view. And that's why you need to be thinking strategically, okay, what am I going to do if I get attacked? Now, up in the fighters corner here, these are people that understand that cyber resilience is important, that you're starting to build it into your day-to-day operations. Maybe you've got some good technical controls in place, but maybe there's other bits and pieces that you need to work on. But at least you are prepared and you can bounce back from attack. And finally, we say reset for future growth because we're all working in a digital economy. Artificial intelligence is going to be mainstream in a few years, and we all need to be working in a mindset that we can actually live, thrive, and work in this economy without the concerns about cybercrime. Now, we hear a lot about cybercrime, and some organisations think I'm too small. No one's going to be bothered with what I've got, or I'm never going to be attacked. Well, the cold hard reality is that a lot of these attacks are automated, and the ones that aren't are very targeted. So I'd like you just to have a look at cybercrime globally. Now, back when I started in the GCSB, the Government Communications Security Bureau, that was back in 2015, and back then they were predicting that cybercrime was going to cost $5 billion in lost GDP by 2016. And then in 2016, they increased that prediction. They said, "Oh, well, now we think that cybercrime is going to cost the globe $10.5 trillion by 2025. Well, we hit 12 trillion last year, so 2 years ahead of time, and 2 trillion more. And now the World Economic Forum and the Federal Bureau of Investigation are saying the predictions for 2027 we're going to be losing $23.4 trillion to cybercrime and lost GDP by then. So you can see that cybercrime is going to be taking a bit of a hockey stick in the next couple of years. So I'd like to do some future predicting with you. So if we know that cybercrime is today, it's around 12, possibly $14 trillion in loss. We know that every 11 seconds, a company somewhere around the world is getting ransomware. And we know that cybercrime is about to expand exponentially. If you're doing the same thing that you were doing yesterday around protecting yourself with cybersecurity measures, maybe you're doing the odd new thing. You might be putting in place some new antivirus, or maybe you do the occasional training session, but you're pretty much staying static. By the time you hit 2027, you're actually going to be going backwards in terms of your protection for cybercrime. And if you do nothing, well, you're actually going to be extremely vulnerable by 2027. So in order to stay resilient, you are going to need to catch up and put in place a program of making sure that your organization is resilient from people, processes, and a technology perspective. But the interesting thing about this diagram is that today is the only time that these is the closest that these three lines are ever going to be in alignment with each other. So regardless of whether you want to work with us or Eugene or anyone, you just really have to make a decision today. What are you going to do about protecting your organization against cybercrime for the future? So let's just have a quick look at what happens when you get cyber attacked. So often, you'll see this iceberg model, and it's a very common one, and we love to use it for cybersecurity because it really explains what's going on really well. So, in a cyber attack, obviously, there's a loss of confidence. You might have breach notification expenses. Over here, we have to report to our privacy commissioner, and if we've lost personally identifiable information, we can suffer a fine. And there's downtime and things like that. But there's actually a whole lot more things that can actually happen to an organization when you get hit. We say that a cyber attack is like a heart attack for a business. So your staff can get really burnt out trying to respond. Your customers can lose confidence in you. In America, you might actually get sued if you lose valuable information of your customers. When you get hit once with a cyber attack, if you pay a ransom, you are actually very susceptible to being hit again and again, because if you pay the ransom, they think, oh yeah, there's a good target, they might pay us again. So there's all these layers under the water that you can't see, and that can have a massive impact on your organization. We've seen organizations over here that have been in business for 20 plus years, and they've been gone within 6 months because they just couldn't recover from a cyber attack. Over in the US, there was a really sad case of a US institution that had been around for 100 years. They had survived World War One, World War Two, the depression, the global economic, the financial crash, and they got hit with COVID, and they were struggling a little bit with COVID because they didn't have the computers and resources prepared to make everyone work from home. But then they were slowly starting to recover, and then in December of 2021, they got hit with a ransomware attack. Now, unfortunately, with the timing of that, it stopped them from being able to accept admissions, and there were a lot of students that had decided to take a gap year as a result of the pandemic. And as a result, after 100 years, they had to close the doors. And that was that. The cyber attack was the final straw. So, in order to think strategically about your organisation and put in place the right plans, you need to understand who's attacking you. So, we like to call them, there's two types. There's state-sponsored, and we'll talk about them first, and then there's criminal gangs, and there's actually a third type called hacktivists, who are less of a threat, but we can touch on them in a minute. So we like to call these guys the rectangle of rat bags. So typically you're looking at Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. They're not the only ones doing cyber attacks, but they are some of the more prominent ones. A state-sponsored attacker is exactly what it sounds like. It's a country who has set up a military unit, and their only job is to attack organizations. They will have projects that they've been given that they have to deliver on. So it could be go and attack this company in the US and get me this information so that we can then either replicate what they're doing or steal their IP or just disrupt them. You will have seen over in Russia and the Ukraine, before that war started, Russia started launching cyber attacks against police, the army, the hospitals, the power grids, trying to disrupt things so that when they finally got boots on the ground, the country was in disarray and might be less likely to launch a response. And they've continued that cyber warfare right through the entire campaign, to the point now where they attack infrastructure on a regular basis. So you quite often hear about their power companies going down and their water supplies going down. And in fact, one thing they did just recently was they took over all the video doorbell cameras in Kiev, so they could actually pinpoint where their rockets were landing and making sure they were hitting the targets that they wanted to hit. So state-sponsored attackers are very common. We see them over here. Typically, we will see about 115 state-sponsored attacks in a year, and that's reported from our National Cybersecurity Centre. Over in the US, there will be a lot more. If they get into your system, they are quiet, they are stealthy, and they want to stay in there and collect as much information as they can. On the flip side, we have the cybercrime gangs. Now, these are organizations, they're set up as business units. They, they work to projects, they work to commissions, they will work for anyone that's got money, and they tend to be a little bit more loud and in your face. So they're the ones that will ransom you, or they'll try and extort money out of you. But the interesting thing about the two types of actors is that they all use the same method to get into your systems, and that's phishing. So fake emails is the primary source because it's so easy. 90% of attacks are caused by someone clicking on a fake email. So you often hear about these 0-day exploits where they've found a whole brand new vulnerability in the system. Well, they only use those if they absolutely have to, because it's just so easy to social engineer your staff or convince them to click on an email and they're in. And the reason they want to attack you is because of the cybercrime economy. So this is how they get paid. So they often do attacker for hire. So quite often we see criminal gangs working for the government, and quite often it's very difficult to tell the two apart. So particularly when law enforcement and agencies like my former organisation wanting to try and track these people down, it's actually very hard because they can often be working for each other. They like to steal username and password pairs, and then they will sell them over and over again. And the reason these are so valuable is because they can actually they can use this information to build a profile of you, and then they can run up credit in your name, or they can actually attack your colleagues and friends and family trying to present themselves as you. Now, up here, ransomware kits for hire. So these days you can buy a ransomware kit on the dark web. You don't have to pay much money. You can either pay a monthly fee or you can negotiate a share of the profits with the attacker, with the software developer, and then all you have to do is load it up, push a button, and off it will go, and it will ransom a whole bunch of computers around the world. No experience needed. You just need to push a button. So it's made it very easy for people to go in the dark web and become hackers overnight with no technical experience. Now, why has this happened? A lot of this economy has grown because of the pandemic. So if you think back to when COVID started to hit, everyone up sticks. They took their devices, they went home, and they started working out of their home environments. Now, often this was done in a rush, and not many, well, some organisations may have done it in a way that wasn't particularly secure. So when you're in your workplace, you've got firewalls around your workplace, and they would protect you from a lot of these attacks coming in. But when you're on your laptop, you could be in a cafe, you could be sitting in an airport, or you could be working from home, and you don't necessarily have that same level of protection in place. It's possible to get protections in place, but a lot of organisations either weren't aware of them, didn't have the resources to put them in place in such a short period of time, or just felt that it wasn't a priority. So that's made it a perfect breeding ground for the attackers to create this economy. And particularly with borders closed around the world, it means they can sit at home. It's a low risk, high value proposition for them, and they've managed to establish organisations that are just dedicated to cybercrime. So this all sounds very, very scary and a little bit depressing, to be honest, but there are things that you can do to protect yourself. So from a business point of view, you will have insights that your technical teams may not, and the strategic plan and your objectives. The technical teams will have insight on the enablers that can help you achieve your objectives, and innovative tools that can actually protect you when you're trying to deliver objectives. So as a starting point, what we want you to do is think about the strategic objectives that you're planning that will require the use of technology or the use of the internet to succeed. And we always say start with the crown jewels. So what are the things that you care about the most, that you want to protect the most? Often it's customer databases or it's intellectual property or things like that. Make sure you understand A, what the crown jewels are, and B, where they're being stored, because often you'll find with computer systems, it may not be in your organisation, it will be up in the cloud somewhere. It may not even be in your own country. It could be Australia or Argentina, it could be anywhere. As a senior manager, make sure you understand where your information is being held, because that can impact on, if you do have a cyber attack, how are you going to get it back? Whose jurisdiction do you have to work with to make sure that your information is recovered? And once you've worked out where you're starting from, you've got the crown jewels, these are the things you want to protect the most, then you have to be thinking about, okay, well, what are the technical assets that I need, and what are the people, what is the training for the staff that I need to protect this? So who can have access to this information, for example? The people that are accessing the information trained well enough to understand what an attack might look like, and what are the technical controls that I want to put around this information so that not everyone can have access to it. They can't always download it to the computers, those sorts of things. And then identify your technical critical assets. So we work with organisations to baseline your organisation. So we often come in and we'll look at, as I said before, people, processes, technology. Do your people have the right training? Have you got the right processes in place? And I'll talk about in a minute about why that's so important, and what technical controls you have in place. Because implementing effective cybersecurity measures, you kind of have to get a little bit technical, but it's a bit like finance. So you need to understand a little bit about finance to know that your organisation is doing well, and you know the right questions to ask. But you don't have to be an expert accountant necessarily. And it's the same with cybersecurity. Basic cybersecurity controls can help mitigate against some of the most common cyber attacks. And once you have that baseline in place, then you just need to tailor your defences so that you can mitigate your highest priority risks. We often talk about defence in depth. So what we mean by that is you have layers of protections in place. So, for example, your people are trained. You might have strong, long passwords that protect them, but you also might have a thing called multi-factor authentication, so that if someone logs into your systems, then you get a request either on your phone or another device asking you for a number to punch in. So that's another factor that they have to know before they can get into your computer. So the more layers of protection these days, the better off you are. We recommend that you should always have an instant response plan in place. So, and have it there before you need it, because when you're in the midst of fighting a cyber attack, the last thing you need to be doing is trying to work out what are the steps we need to do in order to defend ourselves. And think about things like defending yourself against someone from the inside. Now, I don't mean that all staff, are likely to cause an attack, but you have two types normally. There's the disgruntled employee is obviously the most common one, but there's also the well-meaning staff member that thinks they're doing the right thing, but unwittingly opens up the systems or the technology to attack. And a perfect example of that might be someone that's downloading a new piece of software that they think is going to be great for the organization, but they haven't considered what security is around that software, and it can open up new areas of vulnerability. And finally, you should be reviewing and assessing your measures on a regular basis. Also, think about return to operation time. So if you do have a cyber attack, think about how long you can afford to be offline, no access to your computers, no access to the internet. Is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a month? And if you did have a cyber attack, how much information could you afford to lose? So having strong and reliable backups in place is really important. Having offline backups is equally important, because if you get attacked and your backup system is just a hard drive that you've got plugged into your computer all the time, then they can also attack that as well and corrupt that. So you end up having no backup. So these are all considerations to think at a strategic level, particularly when you're thinking about your strategic objectives and where you want to head with your cyber resilience. And what about your third-party suppliers? You need to think about how long you could afford to continue doing business without a key supplier and the impact of that. So there's a couple of things to be considering around cybersecurity with your suppliers and your partners. So when you have suppliers having access to your computer systems, that's another point of entry for attacks. And likewise, if you have access to other organisations' information, that can be a vector of attack as well. So it's important to ask any third-party vendors or suppliers what their level of security is, what are they doing to protect your information, because at the end of the day, if the information is lost by a supplier, you're still liable. You still have to talk to your customers. It's your reputation that's on the line, and you need to have the confidence that you are protected and that you're doing all things the right way. And the other thing to consider with third-party suppliers is often a large organisation will probably have good cybersecurity measures in place, and they will look for attackers will look for small, less protected organisations that they can use as a vector to get into the larger organisations. So if you have poor cybersecurity, but you're working for a large customer and you've got access to the systems, you could potentially be a vector of attack to them. So it's important to understand that and think about, if your strategic objective is to take on larger organizations as customers and you'll have access to the systems, you need to be thinking very carefully about how you're going to ensure that you are not a vector for attack for them. I want to talk a little bit about your risk appetite. Often we think about this in terms of other factors in business. It's a risk appetite is really an entity's willingness to accept a certain amount of risk in the pursuit of value, and it reflects your risk management philosophy, and in turn, it also influences your culture and your operating style. And it's the same thing around cybersecurity and cyber resilience. So having your risk appetite determines, having a risk appetite, it must align with your company's strategy, how much risk is acceptable to achieving your strategic objectives, and it can also help you with your resource allocation, your alignment of people and processes, and in designing the infrastructure necessary to effectively respond and monitor your risks. It's important to understand your current risk profile and the capacity of risk that you could actually take on in pursuit of your objectives. And it also means thinking about your attitudes to risk. What are your attitudes towards growth, risk, and return? The other thing to think about is your risk tolerance. So in thinking about risk tolerance, it's risk tolerances. You might have, say, for example, you had a cyber attack. You might say, okay, well, we can afford to have a cyber attack that takes out our systems for 1 to 2 days while we're trying to deliver this particular objective or project. But we're willing to accept that if this particular department is taken out for 2 to 3 weeks, well, that's actually okay, because as long as the rest of the project is okay, then we've got a much higher risk tolerance for that particular area to be taken out. So it's important to be thinking about your risk appetite and your risk tolerance when you're planning your strategic objectives, particularly around the cybersecurity impacts on the delivery. So as we know, whenever a cyber attack happens, there's always going to be an impact to your people. There's going to be an impact to your technology, and obviously your customers. So you could be offline. We've seen organisations that have, someone's clicked on an email, it's infected the company, and they've been offline for days, weeks, even months. We had a hospital over here that was offline for 5 months while they tried to recover from an attack. That wasn't from someone clicking on an email. That was a bit more insidious, but that's these sort of things you need to be thinking about. So when you're trying to deliver your strategic objectives, you need to be thinking about, okay, well, if we were to have a cyber attack in the middle of this, what is our risk tolerance for actually having to suffer that? Can we afford to lose 3 months, 6 months? And if not, well, that then helps you decide what kind of cybersecurity measures you need to be putting in place around those projects and how much you need to invest in that. And doing that up front is far more cost effective than trying to do it on the fly as you're being attacked. But in terms of writing effective risk statements, so it's important to link the statement to the thing that you're trying to actually achieve. Be very clear in stating your objectives for what you want to achieve, and determine what the outcomes are, and then facilitate the conversation with the people involved in the project, that they understand what they're supposed to be doing, and what the risks are, and they all fully understand what are the risks if something does happen. And that's now. I'd like to actually have a quick chat to you about some of the threats that are actually out there at the moment, because it's important to understand the theory behind um, protecting, but it's also important to actually know the kind of attacks that you can expect your staff and your organisations to be experiencing. And every organisation experiences multitude of attacks every single day. If you've got good firewalls in place, talk to your IT providers and they can tell you how many times your firewalls get hit on a daily basis. It's often in the hundreds of thousands. But we know that there's over 15 billion new spam and fake emails being produced every single day. So your protections are not always going to be enough to keep them out. So we'll have a chat about some of the attacks. Now, we've all experienced this scenario. An email pops into your inbox and you're in a hurry and it looks safe. So you click on the attachment and maybe you get lucky and it is safe, or maybe you don't. Fake emails are extremely common these days, and with artificial intelligence, you're no longer seeing the fake Nigerian prince who wants to give you all their money. It's the emails are crafted, they are aimed at, they're targeted at you, so they look like something that you would normally click on. They could even be from someone that you recognise. And they're designed to trick you. So this is the latest kind of trick that they are doing. So I just want to take a minute and see if you can work out which is the fake email address. So I'll put you out of your misery. So number 2 is the fake, but it's actually almost impossible. So even if you hover over them, they will look exactly the same. So what I've done here is I've actually used Cyrillic characters in the second email address. So I think I replaced the O. And the thing is, to the human eye, we can't actually tell the difference, but to a computer, they can actually tell that that's a different email address. So someone could, like my address, they could replace my name and put Cyrillic characters in there, and that's actually a completely unique address that could be coming from an attacker with attachments on there. Cyrillic, as in the Greek alphabet. So if you look at your yeah, I know it's a tough one. It's yeah, and this is how devious some of these attackers are getting. And with artificial intelligence, as I said before, they can craft very, very convincing, unique emails that are targeted specifically at you. And it really comes down to you having a second look at things and taking your time, because attackers always like to try and rush you into making decisions. They'll often put information into emails that says, you've got to make a decision now. It could be from your finance officer saying you have to pay this customer now, or you have to go and get this money for me and send it to this bank account because there's an urgent deal that needs to be done. Things like that. They always prey on your psyche and try and make you act without thinking. So that's a common one these days. Another one, I don't know if you've heard of this one, it's called pig butchering, which is an awful name. And effectively how it starts is you'll get a text or an email, or text mainly, saying, hi, is this Jane from the flower shop, or is this Fred from the mechanics down the road? And you go, no, sorry, wrong number. And they'll always have a very nice profile picture of themselves that links into the text, and they'll be a beautiful man or woman, and then they'll strike up a conversation. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to text you. I hope you're having a good day. And they'll just try and keep the conversation going, being very friendly, very chatty, and they'll slowly build a friendship with you. And then over the months, you'll get talking, and all of a sudden they'll start talking about this great financial investment that they've been doing. And they've actually invested a whole lot of money into this company, and it's gotten them great returns. and they'll say, oh, why don't you give it a go? Put $20 in there and see what happens. And so you might be convinced to put $20 in, and you'll see they'll give you access to an app or a website, and you'll see your money doubling overnight. And so you might get excited about putting more money in, or telling your friends about it and getting them to put money in, or your family members. And this is how they get you. So the app continues to show you how fantastically your investment is doing, and then the day that you decide, okay, well, I've made my millions, I want to actually pull it out, that's when they disappear. they they will disappear overnight, and your money will be gone. But worse, in a couple of days' time, you might get a call from someone, or an email saying, look, we know you've been subject to this terrible attack. We are actually a company that can recover your funds for you. If you pay us 40,000 US up front, we will get your money back for you. Unfortunately, they're just another group of attackers, or possibly even the same attackers that are still trying to prey on you and get even more money out of you. So they call it pig butchering, because they try and fatten you up, get you believing that it's a legitimate scheme, and then they steal all your money. I don't know if any of you watched John Oliver. He did a really good program on pig butchering a while ago. It's on YouTube, and it's accessible, and I really recommend you have a look at it, because people in the US and around the world have lost millions to these scams. Business email compromise. So this is a really common one for organizations that who send out invoices and who doesn't when you're a business. So you might have sent out an invoice to an organization, and this happened to a company here. They sent out a $60,000 invoice to a company in Auckland. Very next day, the company got another email from the vendor saying, oh, by the way, our bank account numbers changed. So they didn't think anything of it. They paid the invoice, and then a month later, the original vendors came back and said, when are you going to pay our invoice? And they said, well, we have. And they said, no, you haven't. That's not our bank account number. So a hacker had intercepted the invoice, changed just the details for the bank account number, and then fooled the company into paying. And unfortunately for this company, they actually went out of business. They couldn't afford to pay another $60,000 because they were a very small company. But this is very common, and there's a very easy way to stop this from happening. So if you've got a finance department, all you have to do is put in a process to say, whenever anybody asks to have their bank account number changed, ring them up from a different means and just verify that it is actually a correct email, and that you're not being scammed. And it's a simple process to do, but a lot of organizations fall for it, and they don't implement these processes until after the fact. And it can be devastating on an organization. We've had organizations over here that have lost millions as a result of business email compromises. And finally, social engineering. So social engineering is when it's not always through your emails. Sometimes it can be people ringing you up. They will ring the front desk. They'll want to know who your IT manager is, or your CTO, or even your CEO, your chief financial officer, so that they can then use that information to then ring someone else in the organization and say, oh, hi, it's Fred here from IT. I just need you to check your IT. I just need to check your computer, so can you just give me your username and password, and then they're effectively into your organization. And again, as I said before, they may pose as a client. They may even intercept existing communications with the clients to make them sound even more legitimate. They can often offer incentives, and they're often seeking private information, but more importantly, access to your systems. So it's a common way of trying to gain people's trust. And they're nice at first, but they can get more aggressive as time goes on. And their ultimate goal is to get information or access to your systems and corrupt your organization. One other thing is thinking about working, secure remote working. A lot of organizations allow their staff these days to work from home. You may be on the road working in cafes or airports. You need to be thinking about what you're connecting to. Another question there. Yes, AI using fake voices. So deep fakes. So there was a really good case over in Hong Kong just recently where uh, a finance company, one of the people in the accounts department, got an email from someone saying that they were the chief financial officer, saying, we want you to transfer $2.5 million, Hong Kong dollars, I believe it was. And he was a bit suspicious, but they said, look, we'll get you onto a video call and we will confirm it. So they did a Zoom call, and sure enough, there was the CTO and the CFO, and there were a number of people on the call that he recognised from his organisation, and so they confirmed that they wanted the $2 million transferred, and he did it. What he had been witnessing was deep fake technology. So they'd obviously intercepted one of his previous Zoom calls, so they had the video of his team there, but they also had their voices as well, and they were able to manipulate the voices so that they were saying the right things, give us the money, and he fell for it. And it wasn't until a couple of weeks later that he was still a bit nervous about it, and so he contacted the head office, and sure enough, it had been a fake. Um, Deep fake, even when they're calling you at your office, they can have a deep fake voice. It's very easy to get this technology these days. All you have to do is type in deep fake on the internet. I really don't recommend that you click on any of the sites that come up, because some of them are fake, deep fake sites, and you can often end up getting attacked by downloading malware instead. So this is one of the things with AI that is becoming a big problem these days. So the other thing to think about with artificial intelligence, particularly with your staff, and even when they're working remotely as well, is how are they using these AI tools? AI is going to be a great enabler for organisations, but if your staff member's sitting at home and wants to edit your financial forecasts, or they want to edit a bit of your strategic plan, and they pop it into AI without any kind of edits, there's no guarantee that a competitor or someone else isn't going to find that information when they're doing their searching. They may be looking along similar lines in terms of, give me ideas for breaking into the Asian market, and up will pop ideas from all sources, and it may well be your business plan that's one of the sources that it pops ideas up from. Now um, they don't actually link directly to your documents, but they extract information. So if you think about, they make connections to certain types of information. So if it's strategic planning, for example, quite often a prompt that someone might put in is, give me some ideas to break into this market or do that. So if your staff are busy trying to edit your documents and putting your intellectual property in there, then there's every chance that someone else is going to reap the benefits of all your hard work and find that information. The other thing to think about with artificial intelligence too in your own organization is that if you are implementing generative AI inside your organization, you need to be thinking about how you are locking down information that you don't want your staff to see. So they could be potentially putting in a query that could show them all their staff, their colleagues' financial details, or how much they're being paid and things like that. So if you're going to be implementing AI into your organization, there are a number of security concerns that you need to be thinking up front. And so as a strategic objective, when you're thinking about AI, be thinking about, how do I classify my information so that other members of staff don't get it, and those sorts of things. Okay, so to wrap this up, I just want to reiterate that people, processes, and technology are the three tenets that we have to think about. Without having well-trained people, having good, strong processes so that they are doing the right things, for example, checking bank account numbers when they come in to make sure that they're legit, and the right technology in place so that you've got appropriate tools on your computers and your laptops and on your phones as well. We quite often find that when we go into organizations, your laptops are protected, your desktops are protected, but no one's done anything to protect your phones. You know, your phones, a lot of people these days do a lot of work off their phones. I know I do. And it's important to have antivirus and what we call as mobile device management technology on your phones to ensure that attacks aren't coming in via your phone systems. And finally, I just want to quickly talk about uh, an initiative that we're about to kick off. So next week, we're actually launching a thing called the Cyber Resistance. So what this is we've found that if you're wanting to get certified as being cyber resilient, there are actually no certifications out there that can help you do this unless you are a cybersecurity professional or you run a tech company and you can afford to invest in doing ISO 27000 or NIST or other qualifications that will require an investment of 30, 60,000 plus, and then an ongoing investment to maintain those certifications. So we've created the cyber resistance, and what we're looking at is it's a certification for non-technical staff, but also for organisations as well. So what we do is we assess the people in your organisations. We look at First of all, we look at their environmental aspects, so how they operate both at work, both at home, and remotely, and how they do things like protecting your information. So do they use their own personal computers? Do they actually have up-to-date security on the personal computers? Where are they working from? Are they working in an environment where people can shoulder surf them and see the information that's there? Do they print out information at home? All those sort of general questions that you don't always think to answer. Do they use artificial intelligence? How do they use artificial intelligence? And then we asked them a range of common cybersecurity questions around, can you recognize this kind of attack? And it gives us a really good overall picture of how resilient they actually are to detecting cyber attacks, but also in the way they operate. And for the organizational one, we've also got a certification process where we look at the organization as a whole. So they have to have 90% of the organization certified, but they also have to jump through another set of barriers to make sure that they've got the right technology in place, they've got the right processes in place as well, and making sure that they are cyber resilient and able to withstand an attack if it was to happen. So the point of being cyber resilient is not just having these protections in place, it's about knowing what to do if you are attacked. So knowing how to get yourself out of a hole when a cyber attack occurs, because the faster you can recover, the less likely you are to suffer the reputational damage and the loss of customers that you would if it was going to take you weeks or months. So those are just two things that we're working on. And I've given you a lot to think about today. So the key to staying one step ahead of cybercrime is really to be prepared. It's as simple as that. You make sure that your people, your processes, and your technology tools are fit for purpose, and that everyone knows what they need to do. So having cyber resilience as a regular topic of conversation at your board and your senior management level is essential. Know what you're trying to protect, understand the cyber risks for any strategic initiatives that you may want to implement in the future. And even if you don't think you're going to get attacked, in the cybersecurity industry, we say it's not a case of if you're going to get attacked, it's really a case of when. And with as you saw with the earlier slides, cybercrime is going to double, even triple in the next few years. So it's important that you can recover quickly with your reputation and your customer base intact. So I've given you a lot to think about today. Thank you very much for your time. Are there any more questions?
Jan, thank you for what is, I think, a somewhat terrifying but very informative presentation. As an executive or a business owner, there's a lot to think about here. There's certainly a lot to contemplate and figure out. If there aren't any questions, I just wanted to ask one quick question. There was one passing comment that you made, and I'm not sure it was picked up, but you said every 11 seconds, a company gets ransomware attacked in the world. Is that correct?
Yes,
And I just
that
wanted
is
to
correct,
ask
unfortunately.
if you could provide any information, sort of what does that ransomware attack most commonly look like? And what is if there's any information you have about how are most of those ransomware attacks resolved? Meaning, in most cases, does the company end up paying the ransom that the attackers have demanded, or is there some other means or some other resolution that companies are successfully able to enforce or implement so that they don't have some financial outlay?
Sure. So, what a ransomware attack typically looks like is that you will turn your computers on one morning and all your computers will be locked down. There'll usually be a sign up saying you've been ransomed with some scary graphics, or even just a note saying now you must pay us 150 Bitcoin or something like that to release your computers. You are basically prevented from doing business until you can actually restore those computers. Now, if you've got one computer, that's probably an fairly easy thing to do, providing you've got a backup. As I said before, if you keep your backups plugged into your computer, or you don't have any backups at all, and before you ask, using Microsoft, what's the name for it? The 365 and your online storage there, that's not a backup. That is a collaboration system. If you get ransomed, they will be on your systems for days, weeks, and they will be looking for things like passwords for connections to your online storage, to any backups you might have, and they will corrupt all of that in the same process. So if online storage if your collaboration tool is the only place where you've got information backed up, then that's potentially at risk as well. So what we recommend is that we call it offline immutable backups, where you have information sitting off to the side somewhere. You can write to it, but you can't actually edit it or do anything with it unless an IT person intervenes and gets it back for you. So having backups is really the only way to get out of ransomware attacks, but also having really strong logging and monitoring on your systems too, because you don't actually know when the attackers got into your systems. It could have been a day ago, could have been a week. We've seen attackers on systems here up to 3 years.
Well,
So you need to have a good idea of when the attacker got in there, so that you can actually recover from a point that was prior to that.
well.
Does that answer your question here?
It does. Thank you very much, Jan. Listen, we have reached the top of the hour. I really want to thank everyone who joined us live for this webinar. A huge thank you for a really great presentation, Jan. You can certainly learn more about Jan by visiting her LinkedIn profile or by going to outfox.co.nz, since they are based in New Zealand. As always, we encourage everyone to use the Align software. For example, if you want to create some strategic priorities about assessing your cyber resilience and benchmarking where you are right now, creating some priorities about how to improve your cyber resilience, those are great things to do within the software. If you need any assistance or more information, always be sure to reach out to us or simply email us at support@aligntoday.com. Thank you again, and we hope that you will join us for our next webinar. More information on that will be forthcoming. Again, we hope everybody has a great day. Thank you, Jan, for a great presentation. Be well.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.